We'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you to our University of Illinois Good Growing webinar series. My name is Katie Parker, and I work as a local foods and small farms educator for Adams, Brown, Hancock, Pike, and Schuyler counties. We appreciate you joining us for these webinars, and we do ask that you remain muted and have your video off for the duration of the webinar. This presentation is being recorded, and we will email a link to the archived presentation as soon as it's concluded. We'll also send you an evaluation link in which you can go online and fill that out, and we would much appreciate your feedback. At the end of Chris's presentation, you'll also see a QR code, which will lead you to that same evaluation, and you can give your feedback there as well. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat box, and we will give Chris the chance to answer them once he has finished presenting. A little bit about Chris. This week's presentation is from Chris Enroth, the horticulture educator for Henderson, Knox, McDonough, and Warren counties. Chris is responsible for horticulture programming with an emphasis towards the home gardener, landscape maintenance, personnel, commercial landscapers, which includes both adults and youth. And today, Chris will be presenting on landscape safety. So I'll turn things over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Katie. What accolades? They're all lies, folks. Don't worry about it. But no, actually today we are going to be talking about landscape safety. So I'm glad you joined me for this wonderful OSHA video that I'm about to show you. But once again, I'm kidding. Hopefully this is a little bit more lighthearted than sitting through an OSHA training, though I've done that before. They are incredibly valuable. Don't want to knock those folks too bad, but we're going to be a little bit lighthearted here. We're going to touch on a lot of issues that might be facing whether you're a home gardener or maybe you are a professional landscaper. I've been in both worlds, and so I'm going to talk about things that lend to both sides of the coin with that. And so let's just go ahead and just dive right in to what was once, you know, the typical work site. You know, this picture here, it gives me a little bit of vertigo just watching this and knowing that this is how we built skyscrapers a long time ago. You know, there's no safety harnesses. There's nothing. That's Central Park in the background there, New York City. You know, so fascinating stuff. And boy, I sure am glad that we do have the safety protocols that we have today. You know, just because we can, as wonderful as that looks, that's a great view, I bet. But I sure wouldn't want to be up there and doing that job right there. So, you know, once was, you know, what was the requirements then? Probably you had to be wearing pants. Looks like one guy's not wearing a shirt. You know, I was going to say maybe you need to have a shirt on. You know, you had to have boots on. That's probably the requirements here. And they all, oh, a few guys aren't wearing hats, but a lot of them are wearing hats. So, you know, just wanted to share this with you, you know, a look back. But now let's look at today. And we're going to start with personal protective equipment. And you know what? I used to have to explain what this was to people. But in today's world, where we are hearing the term PPE flying around all over the place, I don't really have to do that anymore. We all kind of know what PPE or personal protective equipment is. And so, you know, landscapers, gardeners, we all have our own type of PPE that we have and we wear. So I want to cover a little bit about, you know, the different components of this. And the first thing, and one of the most important things, is our hearing. Now, I really wish that I was a wiser teenager. You know, when my parents said, "Don't listen to your music so loud, you're going to lose your hearing." You know, they weren't lying, because ear protection or damage to our ears, that is something that can occur basically from the moment we're born throughout our whole life. And pretty much, you know, I grew up on a small farm. We had dairy cattle, lots of small engine stuff like mowers and things like that. I spent a lot of time with the constant whir of a motor, in the ambient, the sound of the air. So um, over time, that definitely does play a role in diminishing your hearing effect. I also worked at a golf course where, we clean clubs, and we basically did that all day long. And we sat next to, it's basically a machine. It's full of water, and it uses sound waves to clean off these clubs. And then this is a loud whirring sound. And I realized that after standing there for hours and hours, and someone would come down and they would have a question for me. It might be a golfer or someone, they needed their clubs. I could not hear clearly what they were saying. And I even myself was speaking kind of loudly to them. So if you're yelling to someone that's about 3 feet away, you might have an issue with hearing. You might have been exposed to some loud noises. You also might hear a ringing or whooshing sound in your ears after you've finished up things. And I can definitely say this is for sure. If you finish up work, you get in the car, you listen to the radio, you go home, and you go to sleep and you wake up the next day, get back in the car for work, and suddenly you turn on the car and that radio is just so loud, and you're like, oh my goodness, why is it so loud? Well, it's because your hearing was affected the day before, and so as you got in the car, you probably turned up the radio a little bit so you could hear better. So it's really, really important that if you are doing any kind of work with like small engines, as you see this mower guy here, any kind of really tools that make loud noises, you have to protect your hearing. And so for our master gardeners, what we have done here for our project sites, we do have hearing protection available for them. It's basically the disposable little earplugs that you can put in your ears if they ever have to do any type of mowing, anything like that that involves just being exposed to loud noises. So hearing protection, that is very critical. And obviously the next thing, we're talking about our senses here, our hearing and now our sight. you know, when we're working outside, basically, I think our two biggest risks to our eyes are the sun, and then there's everything else. And by the sun, what I'm talking about is the light that is the eye is exposed to, which can over time damage your eyes. And there are also people who are more sensitive to sunlight. And it can to lead to a lot of chronic diseases later on in life of your eyes if you don't protect them from sunlight. And so sunglasses are critical. Now, the everything else thing here, that's basically everything else. If we look at this string trimmer here in this picture, you can see all of that debris up around the guard, along the pole right there. It's because tools like these just they throw things. They throw things, and that's why that guard's there to protect the person standing behind it. But if you've ever done a string trimmer, you more than likely have gotten hit in the side and the leg. I've been hit in the neck. I've been hit in the face by things, even with the guard on. And that's not only because the guard's not going to can't protect you necessarily from everything, but also objects bounce and deflect off of other surfaces, and they wind up hitting you. And these things are traveling pretty fast, and they can really, really hurt you. Um, you know, so we really do want to make sure that we're practicing good eye safety. What do we want in a good safety glasses? Well, I mean, this image here illustrates it the best. You have something you can see clearly through, but it also wraps around the frame and hugs around your eye, your skin around your eye, to help make sure that nothing comes in from the side, below, or above. um, you know these are things that we often don't think about, having ear protection, having eye protection when we go out to do routine kind of landscape maintenance. So the industry has helped in that regard, that they have tried to make this a little bit more stylish. So, your your typical pair of sunglasses, they look really nice. We like them. They also might have safety or rated safety plastic lenses in them that can help protect you from any type of an impact that you might uh, uh, you know experience. Recently, I mean, just 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine, he was just out. There was a limb that was down off of a tree. He just took the saw and he pruned it off a little bit. The limb snapped up and hit him in the eye, and he could not see out of his eye for a couple hours. That's pretty scary. Of course, wasn't wearing safety glasses or anything. So that just goes to show, we aren't expecting these accidents to happen. So that's why it's always good, have multiple pairs of safety glasses on hand. Not only do you want, good like sunglasses, safety glasses to protect your eyes from light and objects, but also have like a clear pair like what we have on this image here, because one thing that I've seen a lot of, especially with like landscape crews or mower crews, is as the day goes on and we start getting towards sunset, they might still be working on a job, finishing up a job. It starts to get darker and darker. And what happens? Well, they take off their safety glasses because they're sunglasses. You need to be able to switch those out to a clear pair of safety glasses, because I know from experience, as you get later and later into the day, you're tired, you're working probably faster, might be a little bit more sloppy than usual. You still have to go back to the shop and get your equipment all cleaned up and ready for the next day. So you might be making more mistakes then too. So just make sure that you have multiple types of safety glasses on hand. Gloves. Now, gardening gloves come in all different shapes and sizes these days. You have your gloves with claws. This is like the Black Panther type style, I guess. You have your webbed finger gloves. So all of these different kind of, I don't know what to call them, but kind of not necessarily gimmicks. I'm sure they do have a function here, but you have all these different types of gloves. For gardening, I really just like a simple pair of gloves. They have reinforced fingertips, knuckles, and palms. That's what I like. This style right here, they hug my fingers. I still am able to have some good tactile sense of the things that I'm touching and feeling. So, a nice pair of gloves is fantastic. That moves with your skin, with your fingers. Now, if you've ever purchased cheap gloves, I would say, look at your hand right now. In terms of my fingers, my pinky does not go all the way as long as my ring finger is. But you know what? A lot of those cheap gloves, almost all of those fingers, aside from the thumb, they're almost like the same size. And then you got the little extra, material there at the tip that gets in the way. I don't like it. So I like to buy nicer gloves that actually fit my hand and that works well. We wear gloves because it helps protect us from injury. It's because we don't have to stand above a sink with soap and a toothbrush scrubbing dirt out from underneath of our fingers. Now, I will add that in terms of like landscaping, um, there I showed up to my first day as a just a laborer for our landscape crew, and I had my gloves, and all the other guys on the crew laughed at me. They said, "Oh, those will last maybe a week." And they were right. Just the type of work that we were doing, building retaining walls, lots of shoveling, digging, things like that. The gloves lasted about a week. Really, my hands became my gloves. But I always did have a pair of leather gloves in my back pocket whenever we went out onto jobs, because um, we were planting roses, barberries, junipers, all these prickly plants. And guess who they asked to plant them? The guy with the leather gloves, because nobody liked to touch those things. And they all knew I carried a pair of gloves in my pocket. So I always use those to plant those things. And the other time to use gloves, critical, is when it's cold out. There's nothing worse than having cold hands and working outside. That's one of the worst things ever, especially if you smack your hand or something on something like, ooh, that really hurts. So all different types. I'm sure we all have our favorites in terms of gardening gloves, but they are very important, keeping our fingers safe from any type of injury. I'm talking about that piece of mulch that might get driven up underneath your fingernail. It's all happened to us. A piece of glass, something like that. We don't want to get infected nails, so let's avoid that and wear some gloves. Chainsaw safety. Well, okay, I'm not actually going to talk about chainsaw safety because um, chainsaws are the most dangerous piece of equipment that you can just go by and run out into your yard and use. Because of that, you have to have special insurance to be able to teach chainsaw safety classes. And that's something that I don't have. So I can't actually talk about chainsaw safety today. But I can tell you a little bit about the type of PPE that you should be wearing. So like these fine young gentlemen here, the type of gear that you would be wanting to wear would be a helmet. So a hard helmet that can help protect your head from any type of debris that might be falling down out of a tree. Because a lot of these arborists that are working up in trees, they also have crews down on the ground. Now, and you have to make sure that when we're dealing with chainsaws and working with things above our head, we're protecting our head. You've probably heard of that myth, you drop a penny off the Empire State Building, can kill someone down below. I don't know necessarily if that's true. I'm pretty sure they debunked that, saying wind resistance would just really, really hurt someone, might not kill them. But if you get like a half-inch little twig that drops out of the top of a tree because someone's doing some pruning cuts up there and it hits you on the head, that velocity that's created by gravity and that object falling down towards the earth is enough to give you quite the head injury. So these guys are always wearing helmets. And if you are using any type, if you're underneath a tree and someone's doing work up in that tree, you really should be wearing a helmet. Face shield. That's critical for any type of debris that's kicked up from the chainsaw, any type of kickback that might occur. They also do have nice hearing protection on. And then you can see their lovely chaps that they are wearing. Chaps, let's be clear that chaps do not save you from hurting your leg, but they might prevent a chainsaw that's kicked back or something like that from cutting your leg off. So again, that's why they wear chaps, not necessarily to keep their leg from getting injured, but it just prevents major injury. So it's reducing the risk. Now, while we're on the topic of like saws and working in trees, I do want to mention pole saws. You know, we do have a colleague of ours. He was a former arborist in his last job. He doesn't like talking about chainsaws, obviously, and he even hesitates talking about pole saws. Now, pole saws, they're the saws that are on the long pole. You extend the pole, you can reach up into places in the tree canopy. You know, I've used pole saws several times, and I can definitely see where they're coming from in this regard. Because when you are working up in the tree with that long saw, a lot of times you're not paying attention to what's happening around you. So whenever you're using a pole saw or a chainsaw, really any kind of saw, you have to make sure that you have an escape path. Especially if you're cutting anything that's above shoulder height. The reason for the escape path is wood, depending on the species of the tree, how those wood fibers developed in the lifetime of that tree, the type of wood it is, softwood, hardwood, etc., they bend and they snap in different ways. Sometimes it can be unpredictable, especially if that limb, trunk, or whatever it is, there was a storm perhaps, and that is under some type of a pressure or stress. And so that pressure is building up inside that limb. You take that saw and it snaps up, and then you have an unpredictable momentum. You don't know which way that's going. You need an escape path. So make sure when you are pruning up in a tree, anything like that, that you are taking time to move the pruned limbs to piles that are out of the way, and that you have an escape path or paths, plural, out of that area. Always, always, always. All right. So that's PPE. We'll hit a little bit more on that here in a little bit. But now I want to talk about pesticide safety. And before we can talk about pesticide safety, we have to clarify what exactly is a pesticide. Well, this is, this is a very common definition here. A pesticide, basically, it's a substance that it can be intended for preventing, destroying, repelling, or mitigating any pest. Essentially, boil it all down. A pesticide is something made to control, aka, probably in many cases kill a pest. So it doesn't matter if it's an organic pesticide, it doesn't matter if it's a synthetic pesticide. This is what a pesticide does. I don't want you to necessarily think of a pesticide as something in terms of safety. Think about pesticide use and really everything we're talking about today in terms of risk. Because if I tell a homeowner, oh, that pesticide is safe, what do they usually do? That's right, they usually use it with reckless abandon. So, as another example, you have table saws. Table saws, they have the saw blade coming out of the table. You can feed in sheets of wood into that table saw. If I put a safety guard on that table saw, there is a reduced likelihood of that table saw producing a kickback effect on that lumber that I'm feeding through it. And table saws are notorious for doing kickback. So if you're behind it and you're sliding that piece of lumber in, there's a chance that saw could kick it back and hit you if you're standing right behind that saw blade. But if you put that guard on, well, then you reduce that likelihood. But does that make the table saw safe? No, it just reduces your risk. And so the things that we talk about in terms of safety, whether it's a pesticide or whether it's using a mower, any of that is just we're talking about reducing the risk of injury. So trying to keep you safe by reducing your risks. So the main thing that we use for pesticides to do this is we utilize the label that the pesticides have. So there is a specific section on pesticides, and I'm just calling this out. And labels can be big and comprehensive, but we're just going to be looking at the safety section of it. And for the safety section, the first thing that you should always see on the pesticide label is the child hazard warning. It will say keep out of reach of children. Hopefully you see that on your pesticide label. The next thing, you're going to see the signal word. Now in this particular example, it says caution. Now what is the signal word? So the signal word is pretty much a word that is defined by the EPA. So there's an actual definition behind this that goes through acute toxicity studies. Oh, what does that mean? Okay, acute toxicity measures the immediate threat. So if we look at acute toxicity, oral, basically, what is the immediate threat if you get this in your mouth or you accidentally swallow this? Acute dermal, what is the immediate threat if you get this on your skin, inhalation, so on and so forth. This does not necessarily measure chronic exposure. So acute toxicity, chronic toxicity, those are two different things, but the signal word looks at the immediate threat. And basically the signal word is determined by the most severe toxicity category that that this product has. So if it's not very toxic to get it on your skin, but it's really dangerous to get it, accidentally swallow it, they're going with the oral uh, toxicity class category right there. And what we have in terms of signal words, we have the highest toxicity level, category 1, danger. Now, this also might be accompanied by poison with the skull and crossbones on it. I will say, if you are a home gardener and you have a category 1 pesticide in your shed with skull and crossbones on it, what are you spraying? Some type of beast or something in your yard. I'm not quite sure what that would be. Um, these are things that are not typically available to homeowners. So when you're also looking at this chart, you're seeing oral LD50, dermal LD50, so on and so forth. LD50 stands for lethal dose of 50% of the test population. What that indicates is the lower the number, that means the less amount it takes to create a lethal dose. So low numbers in this regard are not good. And as we get to category 2, that is the warning potential here. And then we get to caution. And then there's also category 4 where it's just very low, so you may not see a signal word on it, but that would be a category 4 pesticide. Now, the next thing you're going to see is statement of practical treatment. Now, this occurs if you do accidentally get exposed to it, so in this case, in this example, it goes if swallowed, if in eyes, if on skin, and it even comes with a note to the physician so that then the doctor knows what to do should you roll into the emergency room, and so it gives instructions to happen, what to happen here. Now, symptoms of pesticide poisoning, you can have light poisoning, it's kind of like you kind of feel like you almost get a cold. You have fatigue, headache, you have nausea, you have some dizziness. Severe poisoning, that's when you can get excessive sweating, stomach cramps, vomiting, diarrhea, blurred vision, and of course, death can occur. So make sure that if you are in a situation where you are using pesticides, or if you're on a crew that's using pesticides, be mindful of these things that are happening. Sometimes a guy on a spray crew, they might start feeling sick. They might just chalk it up. "Ah, I just ate something funny or something like no, no. Take a break from your work, check them out, make sure that there's not a leak or something that's occurring, that they might be getting exposed to some type of a pesticide. If you suspect any poisoning, and remember it's suspect, any poisoning, contact the doctor immediately, let them know what pesticides were used. If you go in to see the doctor, take your label along, because again, that label has that care statement, a statement of exposure, making sure that you can have all the information you need so that you can get the right treatment. If you need to administer first aid, and you're exposed to pesticide, obviously, if it's on your skin, wash it off as fast as you can. Get it off. If you're in it's in a like an aerosol type thing, get out into fresh air. Loosen up your shirt collar. If it's something that has been accidentally, you drank it, um, drink at least 1 quart of milk or water. And a lot of times the label will state what to do in that regard. Um, in terms of if it gets in your eye, this bugs me a little bit. Okay, but flush your eye with running water for at least 15 minutes. And you have to, I mean, 15 minutes, that's a long time to do that. Hold your eye over a water source and keep that water going on it. But it's important. It's something to make sure this to have this in mind. If you are, say, a professional listening to this, make sure that this is part of a standard operating procedure, that folks do know what to do in this kind of emergency scenario. In terms of other treatment information, check the label. There's also something called the MSDS sheets. Usually that doesn't come with the pesticide. It's just a very more thorough type of label for the pesticide. You can look all of these things up online. So if you are, again, a professional, these MSDS sheets should be things that you have printed out, available to your foreman, so that they know they have these on hand and they can double check, make sure that they're keeping their crew safe. The other thing, you can also contact the Illinois Poison Center. Also, there's the National Pesticide Institute. Um, it's pretty much a weekly, it's a hotline that is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's funded by pesticide companies. And this is something anyone can call to get information on what to do if there's some type of an accident that has occurred with pesticide. All right, now we come to where it says what are the hazards to humans? And it might also indicate other animals. So in this case, it says harmful if swallowed or absorbed through skin, causes minor skin irritation. It's good to know this is where the hazard of this product, this is where it exists here. Something to keep in mind, that the hazard is equal to the toxicity plus exposure. And you've probably all heard the saying, the dose makes the poison. Well, that's especially true here when we're dealing with pesticides. With low doses, you might not ever get any type of and have an issue. But if you misuse a pesticide, if you do not follow the label directions, if you're one of those people who think, oh, a little's good, a lot might be even better, and you accidentally get some of that concentrate on your skin, that produces a higher hazard. So that's why we're always, um, it's not an extension program if you don't hear us say, read the label. So read the label, making sure you're keeping yourself, reducing your hazards by reducing your exposure. And also, you know, something to keep in mind, homeowners, there's statistics out there that indicate that per acre, residential properties receive I've seen different statistics, 3, 5, or 10 times more pesticides than commercial agriculture. We use a lot of pesticides in this country. Think about the volume that we're applying to our yards. Consider, is it necessary? Do not necessarily think about pesticides as organic versus synthetic. There are deadly organic compounds in this world. There are deadly synthetic compounds in this world. I want you to think about pesticides as their effectiveness and their risk to you. If you want to know more information, if you're trying to decide pesticides to use, and you want to think more about how does it affect you, the user of whatever thing you're spraying, a yard, a vegetable, and also the environment, there is a spreadsheet. It's posted by Cornell, and it's called the EIQ spreadsheet. EIQ stands for Environmental Impact Quotient. This takes into account those three things I described: the user, the applicator, and the environment. All the research that goes into these things, epidemiological studies, environmental studies, and it takes all of these things and it gives each one a score. It averages the score. The lower the score, the lower risk that pesticide. So you can go to your favorite search engine on the internet and type in Cornell EIQ, and it will come up with the spreadsheet that you can download if you want to try to uh, select pesticides that are lowest use. And I actually have a webinar that is recorded at the University of Illinois Extension Horticulture YouTube channel that goes into this specific topic. So you're welcome to check that out. So folks can get exposed through oral inhalation, dermal exposure. So in terms of oral exposure, the biggest thing I want to point people to is that yes, containers wear out, labels might fall off. You might be tempted to place your pesticide in maybe an old soda bottle. Never do something like that. This is the reason why our poison control hotlines get so many calls. This is the way most children are poisoned by pesticides. It's because we put them in a different container. Pesticides, we often think, oh, I bet that tastes bad. That's not necessarily the case. And as a child, 2-year-old, anything like that, they see a dark colored liquid in a soda bottle and they think, oh boy, soda. You know, my parents don't let me have that very much. And they might get really excited. Make sure that you're keeping these out of reach of children. A locked cabinet is the best place, and never store pesticide in a drink container. Never, never, never. All right, inhalation. Dust, I'm sure a lot of home gardeners here, myself included, have used a dust type pesticide. You might have even had a dust formulation pesticide that you mix in a container. The thing about these dust-like pesticides, these formulations, is they can very easily get distributed up in the air. It's very easy to breathe that stuff in. So you never load any of this stuff in a confined area. You want to make sure there's plenty of airflow where you're loading these things. And also, if you get this stuff on your hands, which you shouldn't because you should be wearing gloves, which we'll talk about PPE here next, but making sure that you are washing your hands all the time. I know we're tired of hearing that, but we've been talking about washing your hands a lot with our pesticide stuff and our food safety stuff that we do with Extension. In terms of dermal exposure, again, this might occur. I've seen this happen quite a bit. The hose pops off, spray trigger, something's leaking, you get it on your hands, whatever. This is one of the most common ways that applicators are exposed. In terms of how your body absorbs this stuff, if we use the forearm as the baseline, so the forearm, that's the baseline for the rate that your skin absorbs stuff. Your forehead absorbs 4.2 times more or faster rate than your forearm. Abdomen 2.1, the ball of your foot 1.6, your groin area 11.8. This is, again, always wash your hands before and after going to the bathroom. What this indicates here is basically how close are the blood vessels to the surface of your skin is pretty much an indicator for how quickly that skin will absorb anything, really, products. Okay, personal protective equipment. I told you we would talk about it again. When it comes to pesticides, the minimum PPE is pants, long sleeve shirt, shoes with socks. I'm talking like shoes or boots, and unlined chemical resistant gloves. So very often we would use something, just like a latex, vinyl type glove. Also, though, be mindful that some gloves, like vinyl, they're not good for long periods of time. So you have to change them out every so often. That is the minimum. The label will state what beyond that is needed. When we were doing a pesticide application, Everyone on the crew forgot a long sleeve shirt. So did we do it? No, we didn't, because we didn't want to jeopardize, one, our foreman getting in trouble, and two, our company. And so we want to make sure that we are not only protecting ourselves, our clients, but also the people that we work for. So when you are mixing pesticides, now mixing is considered the moment of greatest risk because you are dealing with a concentrated product, and you get that out on your skin, breathe it in. That, as you obviously, is the moment of greatest risk because it's the concentrated product. It hasn't been diluted yet. You need goggles. You need a chemical resistant apron. You need something to protect your feet so that this stuff doesn't get splashed onto your leather boots. That's not good. And a respirator if it's required by the label. And if you're mixing any type of dust formulation, you really should wear a respirator regardless. Contaminated clothing. So if applying pesticides, again, we're talking organic and synthetic here. If you're doing this day-to-day basis, you have to wash your clothes every single time. You don't just set them at the end of the bed, put them back on the next morning. You have to assume everything, including your hat, is contaminated. One of the biggest vectors of chronic exposure is your hat. People don't wash hats as often as they really should. You wash these clothes in a separate load, handle with gloves, hot water wash, cold water rinse. Make sure to use detergent. If you can line dry, do that because UV light, air, this will help break down pesticide residues. You then run an empty load in your washer using detergent and hot water. If you get concentrate on your clothing, you throw it away. I will share with you that we were once, doing a prairie reconstruction project. We went out into the prairie, we had backpack sprayers on, we were trying to control some invasive species. As we got out in the middle of the prairie, I suddenly felt a very cool trickle going down my backside. I pretty much figured what was going on, but got out of the prairie, took the backpack sprayer off. Sure enough, the little rubber gasket on the hose coming out of the bottom had been corroded and eaten away, and it sprayed a bunch of the pesticide on my back, down my backside, down my leg. So what do? Well, I did everything here. I washed the clothes as prescribed here, but it also got on my favorite leather belt. Do you think I'll ever be able to get that pesticide out of that leather? No, I won't. So what do I have to do? I have to wind up throwing it away. Don't be afraid to do something like that. If it's your favorite leather belt, like it was with me, I was attached to that thing. I still had to get rid of it because I knew there was no way that I was going to get that product out of there. All right. And then restricted entry interval, REI. This is what states when you can safely go back into that area that has been sprayed. So, final notes on safety with pesticides. Again, well-ventilated area, good airflow. Keep your containers low to avoid splashes. We were master gardeners mixing Roundup on a picnic table. Something I don't quite know what happened. The Roundup jug spilled and off the picnic table and scattered like this wide area on the lawn. And you know what happens next, folks. So, yeah, if we had actually not put it on the table, we had it on the ground, there would have been less damage that would have occurred. Don't use your baking measures for measuring out pesticides. Of course, have something specific for that. Cut your bags. Don't rip them. You've been in the movie theater before when you've ripped open that bag of Skittles and they go everywhere. Same thing happens with a pesticide. Keep your hose, if you're filling up your sprayer, always leave an air gap between the end of the hose and where the level of that water is in that sprayer. Never just dip your hose in that sprayer. Okay. Oh, that's a lot about pesticides. We have, again, extension, we have a lot of stuff about pesticide safety. If you really want to know more about it, please feel free. You can reach out to me. I can send you a lot more resources. All right. Environmental hazards. The heat. So the heat of the day, in the early summer, our bodies, they're not very well adapted to dealing with heat. So we have to make sure that we're taking our time. This is the time of year, it's still kind of cool outside, but once we get a nice warm day, we're all going to be out in the garden and we're all going to be sweating buckets. And it's only going to be like 80 degrees. and later on in the summer it's going to be 100 degrees and we're going to be like, oh, it's not too bad. So it's because our bodies need time to adapt to the heat. Same thing, we need the time to adapt to the cold. And it can take 1 to 2 weeks to do this. So as a gardener, make sure that you're giving yourself plenty of time and allowing yourself to take plenty of rest and breaks between time. Drink plenty of water. Really want to avoid large meals. If you take any medication, I would say some side effects for many types of medication, they may interact, if you get out in the sun, they interact if you have too much UV light exposure, so on and so forth. Just making sure, and if you are a landscaper, give your crews time also to acclimate to hot weather. Now, in terms of types of heat stress our bodies can go through, there's first heat exhaustion. This is basically the first step in, our bodies are getting too hot. We experience things like dizziness, lightheadedness, headache, weak, fatigue. Our skin gets kind of moist, clammy. If you feel something like this, get inside to the air conditioning. If you don't have access to that, go to some shade, get some water in you. The next step above this, though, is heat stroke. Now, heat stroke, this is a serious emergency. This is when you stop sweating. Your skin starts getting hot, it gets dry, and it's red. You get disoriented, confusion. Your body temperature has risen above 105 degrees. You might start convulsing, and then unconsciousness. Now, this is the case where if you have crew members and it's 100 some degrees out, you basically have the policy no goofing around. If you start goofing around, if you start acting silly, I'm going to assume that you are overheating. I'm going to drench you down with cold water. Um, so if something like this happens, though, and it's happened to me, we were on a job site. It was 105 degrees. I just got overheated. I was having trouble running my wheelbarrow. I kept dumping it over, and it was empty. So I just couldn't figure out how to keep things balanced. So I was confused, I was disoriented, and I did stop sweating. My skin started getting really hot. So you got in the shade, get plenty of water in you, soak down under armpits, the neck, the groin area. Um, if you are dealing with someone who is experiencing severe heat stroke, make sure that not only are you trying to cool them down, but you also have to monitor their temperature. So once you get their temperature down below 102 degrees Fahrenheit, you need to remove ice packs, get the wet towels off them, because you can snap them into hypothermia. So you have to be very careful. When the body experiences temperature changes like this, it can also cause possible seizures. So just making sure that if you have to attend to someone before emergency folks arrive, that you're making sure that you have again, a standard operating procedure that your employees are trained to use. Sunscreen. We have, there's the Vikings in the world that need sunscreen. And so we make sure that you're using sunscreen that's marked for UVA, UVB rays, minimum SPF 30. I am wearing a hat more these days. I always wore a ball cap, but now I'm wearing a broad rimmed hat that goes all the way around, that protects not only my face, but also my ears and the back of my neck. I've just found that I'm tired of getting sunburned on my ears and on the back of my neck, and this type of a hat is amazing. I think we should all be wearing, straw hats, wide brim hats, cowboy hats, whatever you want to wear. They're very useful in protecting your skin from the sun. Now, very often we really should never be in this situation when we're faced with a thunderstorm coming in and we might get hit by lightning. If you hear thunder, you can get struck by lightning. So the cab of an enclosed vehicle, that's the first place a lot of landscapers might have to run to, but a sturdy building, that's the best place to go. If you know there's storms coming later in the day, listen to the radio, get weather updates on your phone, make sure that you're keeping an eye on things so your crew doesn't get caught outside, or that you don't get caught outside if you're a gardener out on the back 40 when everything hits. Say you can't make it to shelter. You go to a low space, you crouch down on the balls of your feet, and then you place your hands on your knees, and then you lower your head between your knees. That basically minimizes your surface area and you minimizes your contact with the ground. You don't want to lie flat because that maximizes your surface area. You're a bigger target. So obviously stay away from big trees that are towers, fences, telephone poles, things that would be conducive to conducting electricity. should always have a first aid kit on hand. And so if you are a home gardener, you should have one under, maybe in the garden shed, under the kitchen sink. If you are a landscaper, you should have probably two in your truck. If you are, say, a extension volunteer, master gardener, master naturalist, you should also have one of these at every single one of your project sites. These are just the minimum things that you should have in there. I will just point out, yeah, you should probably have insect sting relief wipes, because what we're doing tends to expose us to more of those things, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Poison ivy. You always have to be very careful when dealing with poison ivy. Even if you're one of the folks who said, I can roll around and I never have that. People's bodies change throughout their lifetime. I know folks who have never had an interaction before, suddenly they start getting a rash when they start dealing with poison ivy. Make sure that you're being very careful that you don't also expose others. So if you're pulling this out, and say you put it in the compost pile, or maybe you put it out in the trash, make sure that you also don't get those oils all over the bag, or something that maybe the garbage person might be handling, or someone else might be handling, like a doorknob. And never burn poison ivy. The urushiol oils that are within this plant, they can volatilize with that fire. They don't break down. They can go up into the air and the smoke. You breathe that in, suddenly your mild, annoying rash has turned into an emergency room visit. So keep poison ivy out of the burn pile. Now, poison ivy was once cultivated as a popular landscape plant back by our founding fathers. It's got a pretty nice fall color, and it is a native plant. So it is around all over Illinois. Ticks. If you're not itching yet, you probably will be here in a second. So the American dog tick, which is pictured here, we have many different species of ticks in Illinois. The one that I tend to find most often, that I pull off of myself typically, is the American dog tick. Now, in terms of life cycle and stages, we have larva, nymph, then we have male, female adults. A lot of folks will talk about, I got into quote unquote seed ticks, which are the larval stage of them. And, they have hundreds, or maybe dozens, not hundreds, but dozens of ticks crawling all over them. These little tiny little dots all over them, and it's something to definitely, it's definitely uncomfortable to think about that. But keep in mind, if they're that small, they probably haven't fed on anything yet. You are their first blood meal, so there's no risk of disease transmission. Hey, good for you. You just have to deal with the uncomfortableness of being covered in ticks. Once we get into the later life stages of these ticks, they fed on other things like mice and deer and things like that. And now they do have the potential to carry disease. What do we do about that? Well, we can prevent tick bites by first just avoiding weedy areas, the prairie or the woods. Now, if you're like me, and I know I am, I just can't do that. I like being in prairies. I like going for walks in the woods. So what are my options here? All right, I'm going to wear long pants, and I'm going to tuck the cuffs of my pants into my socks. It's going to be the newest fashion trend, believe me. And when you're in tick country, people know why you're doing that. So don't be embarrassed by that look at all. I'm going to use some type of an insect repellent. I'm going to use something that likely contains DEET. I will apply it to my socks, my pants, my boots. If I have any exposed skin areas, I'm going to make sure to wear a hat. And I'm always going to try to select clothing that is light and colored, so that ticks that are dark colored stand out and I can see them easily and get them off me. If I am working outside, I am going to occasionally stop. I'm going to do a group. I'm going to do a tick check. If you're in a group, help each other out. And once I'm done going home, throw my clothes in the laundry right away. I'm going to do a thorough inspection all over my body, under my hair, armpits, everywhere, and then get in the shower, shampoo, another tick check, get those clothes cleaned, of course. Mosquitoes. If you can see what's happening right here, this slide is about mosquitoes. Not only are there red maples growing in this gutter right here, there's also a nice little pond that has occurred here to allow that to happen. So this is one of the most overlooked areas. And if you're swatting mosquitoes and you're like, I don't have any idea why there's mosquitoes here, check your gutters, folks, or check your neighbor's gutters for that matter. So if you want to control mosquitoes, you prevent their breeding sites. So you try to control their breeding sites. That helps to control their adult forms. Remove any objects that can hold standing water. You can change water in bird baths every single week. If you have a garden pond, you can use fathead minnows or golden shiners in there to help eliminate mosquito larvae. You can also make sure that your covers are tight over grills and the old sandbox, everything like that that might hold water. Tighten those covers up because they need many species of mosquitoes. They need a very small amount of water to complete their life cycle from larva to adult. Again, those gutters, clean them. If you can't remove that standing water, you can treat it with Bacillus thuringiensis and Israeliensis, which is BTI. A lot of folks see them as mosquito dunks. They're pretty much available in every garden center out there. What do they eat? The thing about mosquitoes is they mostly feed on flower nectar. It's when the female has to raise her young, she needs a blood meal for that egg production. So that's when they come in conflict with us. They're attracted to lactic acid and carbon dioxide. These are things that we exude from our bodies. So it's not like we can just like stop doing that. They also seem to be attracted to dark colors, high skin temperature, certain colognes and perfumes. You'll find them most often on warm days with low wind because they're not the best flyers in the world. And you know what? Some scientists are just baffled. They've just found that some people are just more desirable than others when it comes to mosquito feeding. So you've tried to control their breeding sites. Maybe you can't necessarily do that all the way. How can you protect yourself from the adult biting mosquitoes? Repellents. Repellents that contain DEET, picaridin, and oil of lemon eucalyptus have shown to be some of the most effective out there. There are some herbal concoctions that you can also use, but they tend not to last very long, and these are often not tested for safety. Studies have noted that garlic repels mosquitoes, vampires, and people all at the same time. So there you go. If you don't like people, just spray yourself with garlic. Um, and light colored clothing can help. Fans outside. If you're going to rely on citronella candles, you better have a lot of them lined and sitting all around you because you have to be sitting in the smoke for it to be effective. Um, if folks are saying plant this to repel mosquitoes, folks, that's only if you take the leaves of that plant, smash them and rub them all over your skin. So there's nothing that will like just naturally push them away. There's no plants with mosquito force fields. Make sure that also that you keep your screens closed and in good condition. That's how they get in my house because I got a cat that loves to climb my screens and tear them up. So that's how we get mosquitoes in our house. So keep those screens in good repair. You can also do something like this. Now, this is more for the keeping off those buffalo gnats from you, which we're not talking about today. But if you want a garden like this, go for it. So if you are trying to control adult mosquitoes in your backyard, again, the most effective way is controlling their larvae or their breeding sites. But maybe this is your only option. Bug zappers, they don't work. Sonic devices don't work. They actually wind up killing more beneficial insects than mosquitoes. The fogging will work for a short period of time. That's basically what you use prior to an outdoor event. If you're looking at CO2 traps, there are some studies that show them to be effective at controlling mosquito populations in an area. All right, equipment. And we're going to focus pretty much on mowers. Now, you should be reading the owner's manual, and you know that already. Read the owner's manual, follow those safety recommendations. Now, before you go out and mow, this is kind of like your pre-flight checklist. You're going to prepare for safe mower operation. You're going to look for grass, debris. You're going to check under the mower, look for leaking fluid, kick on the tires, make sure they're full, check the blades, make sure they're secure, make sure the guards aren't about to fly off. You're also going to prepare your mowing area. You're going to look for debris, strategize your mowing route so that you don't discharge onto, say, like a car or a building, which might damage those structures, but might also deflect things back to you. You're also going to make sure that that operator presence control is working. Oh, what's that? Well, if you sit up from on the mower, your weight's no longer on the seat of the mower, it shuts off automatically. That's the operator presence control. Or with a walk behind mower, a push mower, you let go of that bar and it shuts off automatically. You want to make sure that's working. You don't want to be caught in a situation and the thing doesn't automatically turn off. And of course, avoid rollover situations. The manual will state the slope that your mower can safely maneuver. If you are on a riding mower, so here there's a zero turn mower, you also have the tractor mower. You want to move up and down the slope. You do not want to move across the slope. The opposite is true for push mowers. For push mowers, you want to move across the slope, not up and down the slope like that. And also, if I go back a slide, zero turns are not as well equipped to handle slopes as, say, a riding tractor mower is. So just keep that in mind, and read those manuals because they will state how steep of a slope you can travel on. If you're servicing your mower, please turn it off first. I have seen situations though where someone is in a jam, they need to move the mower, and so they have a friend come help them and they don't turn it off. It's like, turn off the mower. That's not that difficult to do. What do you do to prevent accidental starts? Well, if it's a gas powered, you remove the spark plug cord. If it's electrical powered, you unplug it. So there you go. Make sure that you do those things. Make sure that you're wearing gloves and eye protection. There's nothing worse than cutting yourself on a rusty blade. Um, Never add blades that are not recommended by the manufacturer. You could make your mower deck unstable and you could really tear up your mower and hurt yourself. Just one tip, as someone who's had to take their mower apart a couple times, take pictures in that process to help you as you reassemble things. I always, always, always though recommend, if you're not comfortable doing this, you have no experience doing it, use a small engine mechanic to take care of your mower. That takes a lot of that worry, that stress out of your life. Just some general things about equipment also. Make sure that you're reading those manuals. If your equipment comes with a kill switch or a lanyard, which is pictured here, you attach it to yourself, use it. That way, if you lose control of that equipment, the lanyard pops out and disengages that engine, and you don't have to worry about it coming back at you or hitting you. The other thing, don't be mean. Don't direct your leaf blower at people. I've done it to my kids. It's not nice. You can hurt them. You can get debris in their eyes, get dust in their lungs. Don't do that. And watch out for power cords, folks. I have cut a lot of power cords in my life, and it's always not just a gentle snip. Sometimes there are sparks and smoke. Bodily strain. Okay. Stretching and acclimating. One of the things when I started doing landscaping as a laborer, um, wasn't often afforded to you, is to start slow. Basically, you get thrown into the deep end and you kind of have to make up for it over time. But the crew I was on was pretty cool. We would stretch before we started working. We had set stretches that we would do to make sure that we weren't straining ourselves too much. Keep in mind that the things that we do out in the garden or out landscaping, something like shoveling, this uses a different muscle group than sitting there watching Netflix. So you have to give your muscles time to acclimate. You need to expect that you're going to have muscle and joint aches. If this happens, which it probably will, treat these according to your doctor's recommendations. If they keep happening, if they recur after weeks and weeks, days and days, make sure that you talk to your doctor about it. When I started as a landscape laborer, I would come home. I would get, I would get the icy hot packs. I would get the ice packs. I would, you know, take my anti-inflammatory medicine, my painkiller, all that stuff, and I would just sit there and just stew for the evening. And after about 2 weeks, though, my body had adjusted to that. My muscles had adjusted to moving in the ways that were required when you're doing such strenuous activity. So stretching, very important. Hips, shoulders, back, legs, lots of different videos online that you can look up about proper ways of stretching. Vary your gardening activity. So if you are doing something for about 15 minutes, that is the max amount of time for your muscles. You start then straining your muscles too much, you could injure them. So you have to vary up the activity. So you're digging for 15 minutes at a time, take a little bit of a break, step back, you can let someone else come in and pick it up. But about 15 minutes is the limit for continuous activity for our muscles. So switch to a different location, take a break, new activity. Now, I just include this picture. I'm trying to say choose the right tool for the job, but I mean, if you're a gardener, you just start drooling when you see this picture. It's like, oh, it's an organized garden shed. This is beautiful. We love this thing. But the right tool for the job, um, you know, they do make all these new different types of ergonomic tools. I wanted you to be mindful though. Ergonomic tools do not make the work easier. What they do is they shift the muscles that are doing the work in this case. So maybe your forearm muscles aren't doing the work when you're using this new ergonomic trowel. Maybe it's more your upper arm, maybe your shoulder muscles that are doing more of the digging. Same thing with the saw. Maybe it's less of a wrist or forearm motion. Maybe it's putting more of that strain on your shoulder or on your back muscles. So ergonomic tools, they don't make it easier. They just change what muscle groups you're using. And there is a right and wrong way to dig a hole. As you can see in the picture on the left here, the gentleman, he's positioned away or back from the hole. His weight is away from it. What you really want is you want to have most of your weight on top, as we can see from the image here. He's near that shovel. He can put his weight down and utilize just gravity to help drive that shovel into the ground. And the one thing, you don't have to just jump on a shovel and bounce up and down like you're in a Wile E. Coyote cartoon. There are tips that you can use to make your shoveling easier, like a sharp blade is critical. You can also just rock the shovel back and forth. I remember the first time I learned this trick, I'm just pounding and jamming the shovel into the ground, and it's just not making any purchase at all. The worker next to me, he's just standing there, and he's just standing on both sides of the shovel. He's just rocking it back and forth, and I just watch as it slides into the ground. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And it works, folks. So rocking your shovel back and forth is much easier on your body. Pace your garden activities. Don't try to be, the superhero here and do the whole thing all at one moment. So what this person here has done is they flagged out about what they can get done every 15 minutes. And that's their goal. And they set their goal, they set a timer for 15 minutes, and they just work between these flags here. That's the area that they're going to do for that day. And you know what? When they accomplish that, they've accomplished their goal. Feels good to do that. Same thing goes if you're a professional landscaper. Set proper goals for your crews so that you're not overworking them, that you have fresh, crews in the morning that just aren't totally burned out. Lifting. This is the most common way we hurt ourselves. I mean, we've all been there. We've all got the back issue, hip issue, leg issue, shoulder issue. Picking things up hurts us. Use mechanical advantage when possible. The older I get, the more mechanical advantage I try to find before I pick something up. Ask for help. It's silly to try to just be the strongest person in the room, try to pick something up. You're going to hurt yourself. And then when you do that, the other people in the room will laugh at you. So don't do that. Ask for help. Make sure that you wear sturdy boots or shoes. I can't comment on the amount of times that we have been moving a friend to a new home or somewhere like that. They're wearing flip-flops or sandals and they trip and they fall down the stairs with a couch on their back. Not fun. A good tip to get firm footing is you place your feet apart, put one foot slightly in front of the other. Gives you a little bit better stability, a little bit more of that tripod look when you're lifting something up. Keep that load close to your body. Keep your back straight, bend at the knees, lift with your legs if possible. Now, I've been to a class where we've had a physical therapist talk about this. And if you've had back issues, you might not be able to do this. They say, lift with your legs. Well, if you've had knees replaced, you might not be able to do that. Say bend over to do your weeding. Well, at the hip, if you've had hip replacement, you might not do this. Physical therapists or occupational therapists, those are the folks to talk to help you figure out the best ways to do this. Have a good grip, wear gloves. I've again had times where you're carrying something and you drop it because it starts cutting into your hands and you can't hold it anymore. And also smooth movements. Don't jerk or twist your body around. That's how you throw your back out of place. As you're trying to navigate around things, try to keep smooth, plan out your path when you're carrying stuff. And finally, a pet peeve. There is a proper way to set hand tools down when you are working in the yard or on a job. It is not this. You do not want the rake tines to be sticking up. You do not want the sharp end of the shovel to be sticking up in the air. Why? Because the cartoons were right. I've seen on multiple times people stepping on a rake and it flying up and hitting them in the face. It just causes too much of a hazard. So wait, how do you set tools down properly? Well, I'm glad you asked, because this is the way to do it. This is the least hazardous way to lay your tools down in the yard multiple times, and I've learned this over being yelled at by a foreman. So make sure that we're practicing, what the lessons that I have learned. I put the shovel down, it's sticking up, comes over, yells at me, turns it over, flips it over like that. So these are the references that I utilized for this. If you do have questions, you're more than welcome to start throwing them in the chat box. I'm gonna be sticking around to talk about this. I also do have some resources that I have put into a box folder along with slides of this presentation. You're welcome to go there, check them out. go.illinois.edu/GG2020. And of course, at the heart of good growing is our blog. We have been putting a blog out since 2014. We do one at least every week. Recently, we've been doing at least 3 every week. And since we're all been staying home and we're not traveling all over the state, Ken, Katie, and myself, we've had more time to chat with each other. So we have been doing a weekly podcast. Last week, we talked with Michelle Wiesbrock, who was a weed specialist. Talked all about weeds, folks. So you can find that at the Good Growing Podcast. And if you want to know what I look like, that's a picture of me from a long time ago before 2 kids that I already had and 1 kid that I had. So I look much older. So I am in Macomb, Illinois. That is my email. Always happy to take questions that you might have. Just might pop in your head before you fall asleep, you drift off. Feel free, shoot me an email. I will be sending you out an evaluation of this presentation, so please look for that in your email inboxes along with the recording of this presentation. And at this point, happy to take questions.